Hello, everybody. Welcome again to another Tuesday evening. This is Solim Wang, all the way from Geneva. We have Tepo Matseba in Johannesburg and he's a retired Colonel Chris Wyatt, U.S. Information Intelligence Officer. Where are you based in South Africa?
No, I'm not in South Africa at the moment. I just came back from South Africa. I did a month tour there, public appearances, speaking engagements, many other things. I live in Pennsylvania. My last
Okay.
assignment was as Director of African Studies at the Army War College. I had plans on living overseas, and then hysteria started in 2020. So I kind of scuppered those plans.
Okay, this is again for our viewers out there. WorldView, the #1 media company. This is where we explore everybody's perspective on things that can broaden our worldview. We're constantly trying to raise the level where we learn more from other people, from ourselves, from the world around us, so that we can inform ourselves, we can inform the world, we can inform decisions, we can also understand why decisions get taken the way they do, why they get announced the way they do get announced. That's what we try. It's a quest. It's an endless quest that we never get there. And of course, just like everybody else who engages on these digital platforms, we have our days when the digital equipment in front of us fails us a little bit. And then we find a way to go around it, just like we did today. So welcome to this discussion. So there's a lot we're going to talk about today. South Africa, things are happening. South Africa is a country that changes news all the time. But over the past 10 days, and this is why we have this guest, we also have Gauta Komane, who might join us anytime soon. We had the United States, the U.S. State Department issuing a warning. They have a standard warning in any case, in case you don't know this, on South Africa, on many countries, and they have to do that for their own citizens. They have to tell them, if you go there, these are the kind of things that are likely to happen, because they have to be seen to be aware of what's going on, to have the kind of intelligence collection mechanism and that enables them to see trouble before it knocks at their door. They have to do that. Whether somebody else wants them to continue doing that is a different thing. So they warned South Africa that some of the information that came their way indicated some kind of planning by an obscure terrorist group on a possible attack in Sandton last weekend. Of course, it didn't happen. We could say it didn't happen because there was no such thing in the first place, or we could say it didn't happen because this guy said, "Damn, we've been found out, so we can't go ahead with our plans." We never know the truth, right? I don't know. How do these things work, Colin White?
Well, that's the thing. Having been a 4-decade intelligence professional and working from the tactical to operational strategic level, working in embassies, doing intelligence work, working also at the National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency. The thing about intelligence professionals, when you're right, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Unless politicians are using it for political favor and political gain, they never know. So we don't know if there, in fact, was going to be an attack. Those of us outside the wire are not reading classified traffic right now. But I can tell you this. Embassy regional security officers do not issue these warnings lightly. These are rare that these things take place. And there would have to have been some significant indicators and information, either human intelligence or signals intelligence, something that would have forced this. It wasn't the only terror warning last weekend. Also in Nigeria, we have drawn down our embassy personnel in the capital of Nigeria. So there was obviously something going on somewhere. When you notice, they didn't issue the terror alert all over Africa, but only in Abuja and only for Johannesburg. When it's that specific and they let that out, they're obviously very concerned about the safety and welfare of people. What's disappointing from my perspective is the state security apparatus chose to lie about this and deny it. The same people who failed to recognize the insurrection in the ANC last year when I predicted on June 29th, and they were absent, and they're still absent.
Oh, so my co-host Tepo Matseba, what do you make out of all this?
Yeah, good evening, Soli, and good evening to all the viewers. Thank you for joining us. It's a difficult one, isn't it? That we are here because it looks like our intelligence as a country keeps letting us down. Now, Colonel is right in referencing July 2021 and the extent to which we, as a country, were caught. Like with the tail between our legs, and the intelligence doesn't seem to come through, and it doesn't seem like we have the ability or the capability or political willingness to actually deal with the questions of intelligence, and that's very, very important. But yesterday I was at a gas station trying to fill up, and I saw something awkward, and it sparked my thoughts, and I thought maybe we should think about some of these things. So you see a bunch of men wearing blankets, symbolically that's Basotho nationals. Symbolically, I say, because I can't say everybody who's wearing a blanket.
That's the traditional way, right?
Yeah, that's their traditional gear. But there's a bunch of these guys at a gas station sitting and doing nothing. And we had incidents in Krugersdorp recently in the West End of some allegations of rape, allegations of illegal mining, rape of about more than 14 young women and some 14 men, or maybe 20 young women and some 14 men were arrested for that. We've had incidents of killings in Soweto, and there were in events where Basotho were allegedly involved, who conduct illegal mining in Johannesburg. And the sense you get is that they are well-funded, well-coordinated. The sad part is, you see these guys, when you go to Heathrow and you sit around the airport doing nothing, somebody is likely to ask you to move. And at some point, somebody will apprehend you, or they'll help you out of the airport. Here, at a gas station, there are attacks on the hijackings. There are terrible crimes that take place at these gas stations, and you look at this and see nothing is being done. So I agree with one of our viewers who says that, by the way, terrorism happens here in this country every single day. And that's because X amount of people die actually every weekend. The other day we had 11 merchants who were shot at in Johannesburg randomly by some men, and I think a couple of those people died. 6 of them died, and the others sustained serious injuries. Our government doesn't seem to have the ability or capability or the political will to anticipate this kind of acts and deal with them. So let's assume the Americans are wrong and the incident didn't happen. Let's assume actually that our intelligence has far more authority and more information to deal with this and to communicate.
We can't make that assumption. We know it's not.
but I'm going somewhere. Let's assume that is correct. Even if they were correct, even if they were to be correct, the fact that we go through extreme levels of crimes, similar patterns and systems of crime, and we can't connect the dots, tells you a story that the Americans, even if they are wrong, what they've done is very good for our country, very good for business, very good for people.
Okay.
To actually spark a conversation. But I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm saying even if they were wrong, this is a necessary and essential debate.
Let's talk about the protocols around these kind of events. When the American intelligence protocol for regime officials in a country, say South Africa in this case, come across information that says to them something big is going to happen here, what are they supposed to do in terms of their coordination, involvement of the receiving state, South Africa?
Sure. Let me just start from the very beginning. Every single moment, every single day, the security officials at every diplomatic mission around the globe are in touch and coordinating with host nation security services. Now, in some countries, that's quite a challenge. In Italy, for instance, our folks have to coordinate with the finance intelligence, with the Carabinieri, with the local police, with the military. In South Africa, they do coordinate each and every day, primarily with the SAPs, but also with other agencies in the government intelligence services. That is a normal course of events. They share information back and forth. Of course, because of source and methods, some information by South Africa, some by the U.S. is never shared, or it's shared in a fashion where it's done is least endangering to the sources. Now, both sides do that. That's fine. You have to protect your sources. But what I have to say is that Tsepo's spot on here when he talks about political will. It's funny, when the ANC wants to do something in intelligence, they're very good at it. There were more ANC agents, white and black, who were part of the Boer Mob than were actually members of the Boer Mob. and they dismantled it. They put all their cards up on the table for that. And when they finally got around to going after PAGAD, People Against Gangsterism and Drugs, they had plenty of agents inside of there, and they were very effective when they wanted to do it. But they didn't do it for a long time until the Planet Hollywood was blown up. Then suddenly they had political will. That's the bottom line here, political will. And here's, as far as whether the embassy was correct or not, I'll lay odds they were correct, especially given the also the warning in Nigeria. Not just a warning, but we have evacuated non-essential personnel. Our American embassy is at minimal manning right now in Abuja. Families have been evacuated. That is a highly undesirable event for an American embassy. They don't call it they don't call it evacuation. They call it a drawdown. So it's about question of political will. And here's the other thing: as far as South African intelligence services and whether the Americans got it right or not, I don't have the NSA or DIA or the CIA at my beck and call. I have an army of one plus people on the ground in South Africa, and I correctly called Brockenfell, the Senegal 2. And July of last year, correctly predicted every single one of those events in advance and warned people about what to do and what not to do. If one person here who is not making any money doing any of this is just able to make that prediction, we know that South Africans can do it. It's a question of political will and also the infighting that's taking place amongst internal government agencies. I think that's the bottom line.
We know that during the past 15 years, roughly, since the arrival of Jacob Zuma into power, certainly well into the current president's term in office, there's a lot of institutions, including the intelligence institutions in South Africa, were abused for political reasons. We know that there have been a lot of money was wasted in that sector. We know that a lot of things that could have been done to protect South Africa, to enhance government's knowledge of what's going on, were not done because people were focused on other things, corruption, getting money. A lot of money we know now. This thing has come out over the past number of years through investigative media coverage that. So people like Arthur Fraser, he still has a lot of questions to respond to in terms of the money that was given to people to buy BMWs, business around the world, around the country, houses, but that money went to, apparently in some cases, to friends, and they were also quite politically aligned. I mean, is it important? Is it important for the intelligence body to be aligned to the president in office, or should they be assisting the republic, or the country, wherever they are in the world?
Well, any government agency, any government function has no responsibility whatsoever to be loyal to the president, the prime minister, or any sort of thing, or any political party. That's a problem with South Africa. I mean, you don't vote for parliament for candidates. You vote for parties. It's party before people. And that goes not just for the ANC, that's across the board. You can throw the DA in there too. All these political parties, it's party over people. And this is a fundamental problem with South Africa's democracy. The intelligence services must be apolitical. And unfortunately, in my country, they have become very politicized with bureaucrats who can't be fired and stay there forever. Look, I had a person who was hired when I worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency. When I arrived, she had worked there for 3 years and was in a upper mid-level position, making over $80,000 a year. She had never written a single product as an intelligence analyst in 3 years. How is that possible? Well, I mean, I don't mean to hurt people's feelings, but the reality is that she was hired based on our hiring practices, and she had a PhD from Howard University, and that was her credentials. When I sat down with her and asked her to write an intelligence product, because I was being pressured to get her to contribute, she demurred. She wouldn't do it. I finally took a different approach, and I gave her a topic for something that required her to write 2 paragraphs. That's it. 2 paragraphs. And you only have to put 1 or 2 sentences of analysis in there on an event taking place in a small country in Africa. She wrote a sentence without a verb in it, a PhD. And she handed me, and she didn't give me a verb. I sat down with her, and she started playing her race games with me. She said to me, she said, well, you're just doing this because I'm a black woman. I said, no, we're talking about this because you haven't produced any products, and I'm getting pressure to get products from you. Otherwise, they're looking at firing you. So I helped her, and I said, this is in a sentence. And she said that in that sentence that she put in there were no verb. It was an adverb. And I said, this is not a verb. It's an adverb. It modifies a verb that doesn't exist. This is the level of stuff I'm dealing with. Now, these intelligence organizations have become so politicized since 2000. And it's really disheartening. I've worked in intelligence since the 1980s. It's really sad to see this. In South Africa, they're politicized too. It's the same sort of thing. Listen, Ronnie Kasrils, a dedicated, devout, heartfelt, serious, committed member of the African National Congress since the Sharpeville massacre. Since 1960, he's been with the ANC. He was the Minister of Intelligence, and guess what they did to Ronnie Kasrils? They bugged his office and his home, the intelligence services. They bugged his home. They didn't trust a guy who'd been a stalwart member of the ANC for decades. They spied on their own head of intelligence. When they want to do something, they can. It's the whole thing is a dumpster fire, and South Africans are poorly served by it. You must serve the people, not the principle.
Okay, before I let Tshepo, and then welcome Gauta. I see Gauta's joined us. He's gone off his camera now, but welcome. Lovely to see you, Gauta. Come and join the discussion. But before Tshepo comes on again, I want to know from you, is it, in terms of the American story, we haven't finished this, how would you explain the way South Africa responded to the American alert?
Well, without any other information other than what's publicly out there, what was said, I would say it's similar to the July situation last year. They were caught with their pants down, and they were embarrassed, either because they ignored a warning from the Americans, or the Americans didn't share all the information with them because it was so sensitive, the source they got it from. That may be a possibility. If that's the case, then I think it's a very big diplomatic faux pas on the part of the Americans. They should have done something to inform South Africans. But honestly, if you ask my heart of hearts, the South African security services ignored a warning that they were given by the Americans, probably because they thought it was too vague and they didn't want to deal with it. And rather than protect the public, they're covering their backside. Look, they've got a terrible record of protecting the public, not just at 70 murders per day, 72 murders per day, but just in general. They don't protect the public. They do an abysmal job. But whether you live in cities, a township, on a real rural area, or on a farm, you are in danger in South Africa every day.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought maybe, as a thought, Chris, just for us to reflect on a diplomatic protocol, because that's an issue that South Africa seems to be raising, that you are in an independent sovereign country, and you give a warning to your citizens, but you're not in a really foreign environment where you don't have relationships. So wouldn't it have been prudent for some kind of conversation to happen with the security cluster, the police, the intelligence, if any, because even from the top, from the president of South Africa, it seems like the Americans just went and announced this threat without having an engagement, and the South Africans are saying, but this didn't exist. Now, was there some kind of a communication breach or protocol breach in this context? We know from history that the US has been correct, but at some point has been very wrong, together with the UK, when you look at how they created the global alarm about Omicron being a South African pandemic.
That was the UK, not the US. That was the UK.
but they all banned South Africa from.
Yeah, they did. It was horrific. And my country still requires you to show your jab to get in the country. It's immoral, but we're one of the few countries left.
I'm with you. So, and wasn't there some kind of diplomatic breach or communication breach in terms of the historically strong relationship between South Africa and the US?
All right, so Tshepo, spot on. I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I think I admitted that just a few minutes ago. So I'm not here to defend the Department of State. I've worked. By the way, for those who don't know, I've worked in embassies, not on a weekend visit, not for 3 weeks, but my tours of duty were in Tunisia, Liberia, Botswana, Malawi, Niger, Mauritania, Uganda, and Ethiopia at the African Union. And I'm a military officer. I also did many other things. So here's the thing: the South African government has no credibility on anything, nothing. I stopped believing anything the ANC said about 5 years ago. Everything they say is a lie. You can pick apart everything they say with facts every single day. So it may be that there was a diplomatic error here. And if it was, again, I would go back to not defending. If that were the case, it would be a situation of a source that's so valuable that they couldn't risk exposing it. If you tell people specific things about an attack, or you do things at a certain point, you can risk burning a source. And it could be an electronic source, it could be imagery, it could be human intelligence source, which is likely. But that aside, as I said, and as you asked the question, was there something diplomatic here? Every single day they're talking. I can tell you right now, there's someone from the embassy today, it's a work day, who's gone to SAPS in Hatfield or in Joburg or somewhere. They've met with security officials or somewhere around the country. Remember, we have diplomatic missions in Cape Town, Joburg, Durban, and in Pretoria. And so they've gone out and they're liaisoning every day. We also have force protection detachment for our military personnel. South Africa is one of the few countries where we have this. They're based out of Cape Town, and they provide security for when ship port visits, things like that, and military come there. So it has to happen. It does happen. In this case, I simply don't believe the South African officials. If the Americans didn't communicate, I'm not going to defend that. I can only explain why it might not have happened. But listen, I have sat in these meetings with the National Security Advisor in Liberia. I've sat down with the Chieftaincy of Intelligence in Uganda, and information has been shared. When a terrorist attack comes, here's the thing. We got to make this clear about the sovereign thing. Embassies, diplomatic missions in countries are sovereign themselves on their own spaces. They have diplomatic immunity under the Vienna Conventions that was set up. These are international norms. So when these folks are there, they have an obligation to their citizens. And by the way, I should make this clear. We are not allowed, the U.S. government, to give our personnel from the government more information or warning or protect them in a better way than American citizens abroad. So we have the same obligation to a private citizen who works in Gauteng as we do to some person on the embassy staff. The big difference is that if there is an evacuation or drawdown, as the State Department likes to call it, the embassy is responsible for the assigned Americans in theater, not the other Americans. They try to coordinate with airlines and stuff like that for an evacuation, but it's not the responsibility. But back to your question, I'm sorry, long time there, Steph. I'll get right back here. The bottom line is that if it was not communicated, then that was wrong. It should have been done in some fashion. But I see zero credibility in the security cluster in South Africa, and that's my position on it.
So, Chris, there are some people here who think that you hate South Africa. Do you hate South Africa? Are you malicious towards South Africa, or what? What's your story? What's your relationship with South Africa?
Wow, someone actually said that there? Clearly, somebody who has no clue who I am. Absolutely no clue who I am.
Tell them.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, I don't mean to steal the oxygen in the room. Shepo, hang on there, brother. You get back on here. But all right. So in the 1970s, as a junior high school student, I followed the liberation movements in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, and in Mozambique and Angola, and was fascinated by it. Read a book by a CIA operative who was involved with the FNLA and Holden Roberto in Angola, when we picked definitely the wrong side and became fascinated. And that was my interest in Africa started there. I became interested in South Africa. And then I read a book by James Michener called The Covenant, which is historical fiction. It talks about the history of South Africa. It was fascinating. And my interest in South Africa grew from there. In the 1980s, when I became early 1980s at university, I was introduced to rugby. We didn't have a national side at the time. And even though we had a lot of rugby clubs, we had a national side to root for. So as a historian, I looked to see it was great, and seeing the Springboks historically are great. And I had an interest there. So I became a Springbok fan. Was immediately asked, what are you, a racist? I'm like, it's rugby, man. Take a breath. Okay. And then in 1984, I started teaching myself Afrikaans after I became fluent in German. What are you, a racist? No. Most of the people who speak Afrikaans are not white people. What's your point? Number one. Number two, if you learn a language, you learn about people. And I learned a lot about Afrikaans speaking people, white and colored, in South Africa by learning Afrikaans. I'm not proficient in speaking, but I can read it, write it quite well. Anyway, that's where my interest grew. And from there, when I was an undergraduate, I studied Southern African history, focused on that. And then as a graduate student, I wrote a thesis on the housing subsidy program back in 1995 that the ANC proposed, and said that it was wrong-headed and going in the wrong direction. So my interest has been there for a long time. Whoever said that I don't like South Africa is clearly just trolling or not paying attention. I have said 1,000 times over on my censored YouTube channels, on my other platforms, in my writings, that if I were not an American citizen, the only citizenship I would covet would be South African. It's an amazing country with so many different people. I promote Tswana, I promote Sotho, and I promote Afrikaans. So stop with the trolling. I love South Africa. You just don't know what you're talking about.
That's fine. This is an opportunity to address all those things and to make you facts. People will hear you. Some people will not hear you because they don't want to hear you. But that's not your problem. That's their problem. Just a few comments, Step Up, before you take over. Joking Athe says South Africa has a huge intelligence problem and terrorism problem. It's called the criminal enterprise ANC. Oops. And then
it's a racketeering enterprise.
Let me just review. And a good evening to all my peeps. Okay, we are all having some technical just a minute. Well, we did suffer a terrorist attack on Saturday, says Patrick Vianello. 70 people were killed, like every other day. That's very sad, isn't it? It appears that South Africa's response was irritating, or an irritation to the US. I wonder what that is. Why was the ANC privy to knowledge that the US was not? So, I mean, if when you look back at what happened, what would you do differently? I mean, what do you think? I mean, South Africans came. I wasn't surprised by ANC denied. Just the same way when we have xenophobic attacks in South Africa, which are xenophobic, we should call them what they are. because people are being attacked because they're foreigners. That's xenophobic. There's no other definition for that. The ANC government will come and say, no, there's no such thing. They deny everything. They deny that Jacob Zuma was a schmuck who stole from South Africa. They deny everything. So, I mean, if you tell the ANC that there's a big truck coming their way and they're standing in the middle of the road, they need to get off. They will not get off if you know that somebody they like. That's a problem with facing in South Africa. I mean, let's talk about these things.
Sepo, it's on you, brother.
I'm trying to avoid making this a debate about the ANC. Because then we'll be missing the point to address the issue. The issue is that there's a lack of intelligence in South Africa, the political will, the capability.
But the ANC runs the intelligence in South Africa. I mean, the ANC is the Makolo bars of South African politics. You can't discuss South African politics, economic policy without mentioning ANC. Otherwise, you're a hypocrite.
No, of course. But if we centralize it to the ANC, we are taking the debate to the House. I think there is a missing link that we're having this discussion. In other countries, a government representative would be interested to give their perspective on this specific issue instead of issuing statements, and instead of having a family meeting and telling us what they think one way without us having an opportunity to engage and to ask important questions. So what we are getting quite often is quite an instructive one-way communication. But isn't it concerning that some may argue that the US has from time to time, even in its own country, issued alarms that were unwarranted, but alarms that amounted to nothing over a period of time. And in fact, they themselves failed to anticipate a lot of complex acts of terrorism in their own land. If you look at incidents around the lone gunman who will go to a school or a church and kill innocent people, and now I'll give you a chance, Chris. But now they have an opinion that they share with the world, and of course, legitimately perhaps with their citizens in another jurisdiction, or rather a sovereign country, without providing any facts. Simply saying we think there's, I can wake up. Then it means if you are powerful and you can actually wake up in the morning and say, we believe that Russia is sending something to South Africa tomorrow, or things like that. Is it that South Africa, does it have anything to do with South Africa actually taking its position on Russia and Ukraine?
Chris,
beginning to ask that question.
Chris, before you respond to that, I want to say this. Does it mean that the US has to be perfect in its intelligence gathering before it warns other people? I mean, I can understand. I see they miss a lot of stuff that happens on American soil, especially those attacks in schools by individuals. But the fact that they miss many or all of those things, does it mean that they cannot then warn other people when there's trouble there? One. Two, if I plan to come and rob your house on Saturday night, and then you issue a warning that information has come your way that Sole is planning to gather to rob my house, then I will not rob your house, because now I know you know. But it doesn't mean that the warning was wrong, because I had been planning to rob, and you took it out there. Then I decided not to rob. So the fact that people didn't attack South Africa doesn't mean that the US was right. I'm not saying it was right, but I'm saying we can't assume that it was wrong simply because these people said, damn, the information, the plane has been thrown out there. Why should you go? Because they're going to be waiting for it. If you're going to rob a bank and then it comes out before you rob a bank that they know that you're going to do it, surely you're going to stop robbing the bank. I mean, it's logic to me. I don't know. Chris, what do you say?
Yeah. Well, okay. First off, we're conflating things. Whether somebody robs your home is not a function of intelligence. And that's
I'm just giving an example.
This is whether someone shoots someone in school is not a function of intelligence. We're selling this because South African Police Service has a crime intelligence, but crime intelligence, like the FBI, they go after organized crime, organizations, and try to infiltrate them. Taxi gangs, things like that, organized, cigarette smugglers, things that's what crime intelligence is. A school shooting, okay, I got to be clear. I'm not picking on Seppo here, but it's got to be clear for people. There's a very big distinction here. We're talking about national security here. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about organizations or individuals who affiliate or align themselves to do something to create terror. A school shooting is not a terrorist attack. I'm sorry, however people want to do that. Oftentimes deranged people are responsible for it. Oftentimes it has, in order to be terrorism, there are 5 elements. I'm not going to go into that. And I used to teach this, by the way. There are 5 elements to terrorism. Intent's one of them. And you know, so we have to be very clear.
Also, can you mention the 5? You don't need to go.
Well, I mean, you've got intent, you've got organization, you've got methodology, and save it for later. We're going to lose that at time because only an hour here. But here's the thing. So the other thing is you have to understand, when it comes to things like law enforcement, that's a law enforcement function.
Chris, if you're saying there are 5 things and you've been teaching them over the years and you're unable to mention the 5 things, you're losing credibility. Do you know that?
I just gave you.
You can't say I've been teaching. No, give me 5. You said there are 5 things.
Finance, intent, organization, ideology, and methodology. There's 5 right there. Come on, man. Come on, Sully. Okay.
No, it's settled.
Okay.
People are watching you, Chris. People are watching you.
Yeah, I know. You know, apparently, you've got trolls here and here that just love to lie.
No,
let's see.
great people who agree and disagree, and that's part of
disagree.
The debate.
Come on. So ad hominem attacks. Lobohan says Americans lie and steal. Where do you live, Lobohan? I could use some more money. Let me know where you live, since Americans steal. Give me a break, man. Okay. Anyway, back to the point. So that's criminal activity. That's law enforcement. That's a function of local police departments, sheriff departments, federal police, state police, and the FBI. Those are multiple organizations. We have almost 800,000 law enforcement officials across this country, 350 million people. So, I mean, that's not the same as what we're talking about here. There is a law enforcement element to countering terrorism, but we can't mix the two. And yes, let's go back. Let me just tell this right now. Seppo's right. You guys are correct. The American intelligence community has gotten many things wrong. 9/11 wasn't predicted in the fashion that it occurred. The so-called weapons of mass destruction that the Bush administration let everybody latch onto were never found in the fashion that people thought. Nuclear weapons. Well, they had Scud missiles. That's a weapon of mass destruction, and that's the end of the case as far as I'm concerned. But yes, they have gotten many things wrong. But school shootings are not the national intelligence community's responsibility. Bombing of a building, that sort of thing. It's very important to make that distinction. So I just, but anyway, so Lobohan, again, tell me where you live, Lobohan. I need some money.
Sorry, Chris. I disagree.
Okay.
But I really disagree. So you in one of your pillars, you talk about methodology, you talk about intent, and somebody walks into a church, shoots like 100 people or 10 people randomly, and you call that not an act of terror. I think, and at a pace that it happened at multiple locations in the same country, and it happens over a period of time. Actually, you are known. You are probably the only country in the US known for this type of activity happening en masse. So for us to call it now, I think scientifically maybe not, but at a really principled level, those are acts of terror. But I'm not gonna. I mean, this debate is not about the US. It's about the warning that the US
exactly
South Africa.
Okay,
I think South Africa has something to answer about its own intelligence. But maybe let's welcome Gauta to share his views.
Hey, thank you.
Transpired.
Thank you. It's load shedding. Thank you, Chris. Hi. I've been listening to Chris's presentation. His low regard for South African intelligence. The litmus test for South Africa's intelligence forces was July 2021 riots last year. The report of the panel of experts says that the National Security Council, which the president heard, which consists of ministers in the security cluster, had not met for a number of months before that those riots began, in spite of being warned by the National Coordinating Council of heads of departments and in that security cluster. And there's been the structures that there's a criticism in the sector, in the intelligence sector, that there are too many structures, and many of them are understaffed and undertrained, from the provincial coordinating structures, the national coordinating structures, the net joints, all of them. But this one takes the cake. The president has been warned about possible threats to stability emanating from the political infighting in the African National Congress. But the president had not convened the Security Council for a number of months before that happened. So you are not wrong out there, Chris.
Yeah, well, you talk about Chepo talked about political will. That's the bottom line right there. There's no political. When they want to do it, the ANC can pull it off. Spying on Ronnie Kasrils, the breaking apart of the Boermag, finally going after Pagad when they want to, but they lack the will. And for some of the reasons you mentioned, but most of it, in my view, is political.
Okay, I limited a few comments. Chris, this is MJKKHS. I don't know what this stands for. Chris, your anti-ANC obsession is making light of a very serious discussion, setting the bar extremely low. We could benefit from serious, yeah, especially from panelists. Okay, dude, come on.
Okay, well, I just
wait,
people.
Let me read a few more. Chris knows more about us than we do. Most people are saying, was the threat anything to do with ISIS group in northern Mozambique? Okay, Chris knows his stuff. WorldView, just be careful. YouTube love Chris very much, and he draws their attention like flies. Oh, damn. Sadly, too many South Africans are woefully ignorant on many issues locally and globally. I think the RSA government were informed, but South Africa ignored it. Then the USA decided to announce the alert through a website in Pretoria, etc., etc. So Chris, usually when information comes to the US intelligence, I mean, you've been working in, let's say it comes in on Thursday, that something might happen on Saturday or Sunday. I know the South African government to be too slow on many issues. They want to meet and have a hotline and meet, consult this one and that, especially with the current president who's very generally undecisive. So I mean, I can imagine the USA do it. We have to act tomorrow. I mean, you still want to encourage to meet committees here and there before you what else? We can't wait because we have to warn. I mean, I'm being, of course, Commander, deliberately the way I am now. But is it what could have happened, that the South Africans were too slow and the US decided anyway to go ahead and tell their citizens this could be happening?
Well, whoever wrote
before you come in, Chris, sorry, this question that ties up with your question, with that comment. Remember the Tulsi twins that had been jailed for 5 years.
Yeah, they were released recently.
They were planning to bomb the U.S. embassy, to kill a cartoonist, a Jewish cartoonist. They were detected and they were put under surveillance by the CIA. It's the CIA that intercepted their communication with people in Yemen, a terrorist cell of the ISIS. Now, had it not been for the CIA, those two boys would not have been arrested or not have been detected, because our intelligence was out of its depth. Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah. Here, since you're mentioning that, I should mention that, there are many times that the host nation warns our embassy personnel about a threat that we're unaware of. A criminal threat, a demonstration, or a terrorist attack. I mean, that happens all the time. In fact, we've had people survive in Tunisia because the government warned us, in Europe because the government's warned us, around the world. And the South Africans have been very helpful in the past, and it's been a two-way street. So I suspect that the person who typed that comment a few minutes ago may have been spot on. There was a slow response from the South African government, and they simply ignored it or downplayed it. And the U.S. has a moral and legal responsibility to its citizens, and that's one of the functions of an embassy. So that's what's going on here. But your question was not that. What was your question before that, Sully? I was listening to Hoda, so I got kind of lost on it. But anyway, well, maybe we'll come back to it, or it'll come back to us after the senior moment.
No, it was about
Yeah,
the time that it takes, how long it takes between seeing.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very important question, actually.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now. If the embassy receives a message from SAPS or from SANDF or from the CIA or from the National Security, or just an informant who comes in off the street and goes to the embassy and says, hey, I know somebody's going to do this at the consulate in Cape Town. Immediately after that person is met, or as soon as that message comes in, the embassy convenes a principals. I'm going to call it principals because we don't need to get into terminology. A body of principals, head of all agencies and people responsible. Because, you know, in some embassies, we have FBI, we have USAID, we have Centers for Disease Control, fighting HIV, yada, 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 all these different government department of defense. So the head of those all come in, they meet, decisions are made, and they decide whether they need to up or raise the security warning level, and they take action immediately. It doesn't matter if it's on Christmas Day, that meeting will be convened. It doesn't matter if it's New Year's. I've been in those meetings. It happens instantly. There is no committees, no portfolios, none of this BS that takes place in bureaucracies in DC or in Gauteng. It happens immediately around the world, even in a small place like Togo, where we got like 30 people working. Immediately it happens. Whether there's action taken or a warning put out, that's a different story, because you have to assess the threat.
Okay. So, Tsepo, here you go.
You're on mute, Tsepo.
You're muted, Tsepo.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having a problem with the fact that so we know now that we have an intelligence problem, and we get these warnings, but at a structural level, perhaps even where the state security is now sitting in next to the president, but do we have the right people leading that system? Because even when we speak about very serious issues such as intelligence, we don't sound like we understand it. We don't sound like structurally we have a sense of what are the key pillars that should hold this thing together so that it functions. All I'm hearing is, granted, I mean, the Americans have given a warning, and we may agree or disagree with the warning, and that's okay. But I'm getting a very strong sense that someone is completely lost, and some people completely have no clue about actually what holds this thing together. What is it, firstly, and what holds it together? At least if I reference the late Jackie Silebi, many problems.
He was arrested for being captured by the underworld. Say it first.
But yes, but I take that. That's not the point I want to make. But Silebi was very close to this Interpol, and at least some type of conversation that seemed to say that politically he had a will to understand and to articulate the right message around.
He was a representative of Interpol, but I mean, his reputation fell when he was arrested for being involved with the underworld. You don't.
Yeah, but the point is just like you may not agree with the Americans. The point is we just seem not to have the skill set, or the right people. If they are there, they are busy spying on each other and telling us things that sometimes are not of adding value. In a sense, when you look at the issues around Phala and while that debate is necessary, where is the same level of effort and complexity when it comes to understanding the country's intelligence strategy? I don't know that it exists.
Yeah,
and I'm not getting a sense that someone is telling us either it was written by some consultant from very, very far, and people are unable to interpret the strategy, or it doesn't exist. Isn't there an opportunity here for us to start having the conversation about who and analyzing who are the people actually who are running the system so that we at least get to some point practically a Gauta.
Well, but
Yeah.
I mean, can I just come in there before we go? Look, first of all, we need. Chris started touching on the topic earlier. What is the role of national intelligence? These people are supposed to look at the republic in South Africa in this case, and look at what possible danger. That's why we have internal intelligence and external intelligence. These guys' job is to look at potential threats to the republic, whether they emanate from inside the republic, from outside the republic, and they have to warn the executive. Now, we know that during state capture, the intelligence community network of department services was badly weakened, just like all other institutions in South Africa. So Ramaphosa, in response to that, recently decided to bring it into the presidency because it was too out there. He has been criticized for centralizing power in his office. I think in his response, he said, no, I'm bringing this service into the presidency so that we can stabilize it, so we know what's going on, stabilize it, and after that, it's going to go out there. Remember that we used to have a minister of intelligence. We no longer have a minister of intelligence. That responsibility is in the office of the president. He's saying this is just for a short period. I don't know how long a short period is going to last for before it goes out there again. But I mean, are we doing it right? What should we be doing to strengthen South Africa's intelligence community services and make sure that it does what it must for the republic, not for any president or any political party in power? Because that has been the problem in South Africa up to now.
Solely tying up with that, the investigative panel into the July unrest found that not only didn't the National Security Council meet, but also this committee, when it called certain ministers who sit on the National Security Council, a couple of them refused to meet this panel and tell the panel why their departments were tardy. And remember also that the Minister of Defense defied the president when the president said to send the army to KZN. Now, not only
wait a minute, we have a minister. We have a minister of intelligence and a minister of defense. The minister of intelligence has no powers to send the army to anywhere.
Correct.
Let's get it clear.
The minister of defense was asked by the president to send the army to KZN, and she said, no, this is not an army matter. This is a police matter. So defied the president. Now, the panel that interviewed the ministers in the National Security Council says that a couple of them refused to meet with the council and tell them what they knew and what there was the responsibility for their departments and why were their departments tardy when they were supposed to provide intelligence and do what they were supposed to do. Now, that tells you about the political will and the competence, lack of political will and lack of competence. And it means that there is instability. In fact, this committee found that the instability in the African National Congress affects also the cohesion and the capacity of intelligence in the country. So, on a number of indicators, the operationally and politically, strategically, we are found wanting by two expert panels. The first one, Mufamadi panel. Now the second one, the panel into the July unrest last year. Firstly, that they warned the president, the National Security Council, about some of these problems in intelligence. Secondly, when they happened, the departments were nowhere to be found. Only the defense force, after the president insisted, then after a couple of days, the soldiers, 2,500, were sent to KZN. But they found that military intelligence, police intelligence, national security intelligence, the political level, were very, very poorly led, and they had no plans, and they don't take even their own decisions serious.
Okay. Chris, you agree?
No, I don't agree on one point. I clarify something very.
I don't agree on one point. I have to clarify something very.
Where's the back feed coming? Okay, somebody's got their mic on.
Where's the back feed coming?
Somebody's listening to the video.
somebody's listening to the video.
Are we good now?
Are we good now?
Okay.
It's
No, I don't think we're good, but
Okay.
no, it's still coming through, but I'll just say it and hopefully people can hear me.
I'll just say it and hopefully people can hear me.
Donald, what's going on there? There's this
I
feedback.
don't know. It's not me.
Gauta, switch off your microphone, please.
not me.
Okay, guys, can you mute yourself and
Unmute yourself and switch Chris.
Unmute yourself really speak.
All right, there we go. All right, now we go.
There we go.
All right, so
All right, now we go.
I still have
All right, so
myself. What the heck is going on here?
What the heck is going on here?
I think we have a foreign intelligence.
We may have an intelligence service
We
here.
may have an intelligence service.
Somebody doesn't like this conversation.
Yeah, apparently not. Yeah.
Okay, we're good now. Go
So,
ahead.
okay,
please.
so it's good. All right, so let me just look. Not to disagree. Gauta's got some great points here, so I'm not trying to disagree, but I got to be clear about something here. From my perspective, and I'm not going to defend her because she's a useless slug, and she's a useless slug leading the parliament now. But the former defense minister did her job when she offered her advice to the president, saying that under the current circumstances, these are my words, not her words, you can't deploy the army. If you want to deploy the army, you have to take measures which are allowed under the law, which Ramaphosa failed to do and should have been doing in June 29th, June 30th. He should have been taking these measures. The fact that we saw 7,000 people dancing and toying outside of Nkanla with Jacob Zuma perfectly healthy up there dancing with, Carl Nyhorst. Yeah, I know it's Niehaus. Yeah, Carl Nyhorst and Ace Magashule dancing up on the stage. 7,000, and the police took no action, all in violation of lockdown. I don't agree with lockdown, but all in violation of it. They took no measures whatsoever, any of the security services, and we find police with no bullets, no rubber bullets. They're gone within 2 hours, no ammunition, no pre-stage equipment, no coordination. She did what she was supposed to, but she should have done it far sooner. And Ramaphosa is the one who sat there and took no, for 5 days. He's like, where's your mosque? Where's your mosque? Where's your mosque? And not even talking about the insurrection in KZN until the 13th of July. He ignored it for 4 days. Over 200 people were already murdered by then. Countless. Anyway, so my point here is that the defense minister, I think, did her job, just did it poorly and should have offered that advice ahead of time. If I were the South African defense minister, I would have been around Ramaphosa's door on June 29th. Hey, you see the Concord just convicted the former president? Guess what? We're going to have the crap going on in KZN for sure, around in Nkanla. But they took no action, and that's sad. Very quickly, for the hate wanker that just loves to come on here and keep saying I hate South Africa, grow up. Grow up. Obviously, you know nothing about me. You're just a hate wanker. Stop wasting your keys. Do something more productive. Thank you very much, Sully. Now we can't hear Sully. We can't hear Sully.
I think Sully's still on.
No. I'm saying that when we put ourselves into the public sphere, we're going to have haters. And that's okay. It comes with the territory. We're going to the kitchen, there's going to be some heat.
Trust me, I know. Apparently, I'm a white monopoly capitalist Klan supporter, and a colonist. All of those things.
I'm apparently the revolution. Don't worry. Okay?
Apparently, I'm a racist because the 640,000 people I kept from starving to death.
We get all that. Some of us are not proud Africans and stuff. We've now the skin is thicker.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me ask this of Chris. Is there a threat from Mozambique? Is there a risk of spillover because of the war in the north of Mozambique?
Okay, awesome.
Yes,
it's a good question. It's one that's been asked since the Palmer raid took place over a year ago. My point on this is that there is a risk of people who have interest or want to link themselves to the so-called Al-Shabaab, or whatever they want to call themselves in Cabo Delgado, but they're not Al-Shabaab. That's just a stupid name that they're just latching onto. There is a risk that someone will have interest in South Africa. South Africa has been a haven for terrorist financing. It's been a throughput because of advanced financial services for decades. We all know this. The South African government admits it, as well as international financial organizations. But as far as that conflict coming to South Africa, no, there's no risk whatsoever. I mean, the distance is so far. The number of people that support that organization or participate in it are a few hundred. If the FATM, the Portuguese military, did its damn job instead of protecting the Total refinery, then this thing never would have got to where it was. I've been warning about Cabo Delgado violence for over 6 years. I predicted this in 2011. I've been telling people since it started, and nobody cared. Nobody cared, and people still don't care. But to your point, I see very little to no risk of that conflict finding its way to South Africa. South Africa's got its own problems, and it's going to have to deal with those. That fight won't get there.
Here's another question for you, Chris. Russia invaded Ukraine. There's a war in Ukraine and all that stuff. We know South Africa has been not too clear about where it stands. It's been sitting on the fence because it doesn't want to upset Putin or Russia for the role that the Soviet Union, which no longer existed, played in the anti-apartheid struggle. Do you think that America is upset at South Africa for the stance for not being clear on whether it opposes the invasion of Ukraine or not?
Yes, I think the Biden regime is unhappy with Pretoria's stance and a dozen other countries in Africa on the Russia invasion. But I really don't
think they would hurt South Africa because of that unhappiness?
No, it's ludicrous. We've just given green mail of $9.7 billion so you don't burn coal, but now you're shipping it to Germany. So I'm not really sure what that accomplished in the carbon scheme. We give you billions of dollars a year to fight HIV. You know, South Africa takes credit for stemming the tide against HIV, but it has the largest number of HIV infected people on the planet, more than India. And we give hundreds of millions of dollars per year. We give billions of dollars to South Africa, not the government, but to entities in South Africa to improve your economic situation. No, they're not going to hurt South Africa. And look, I mean, this is where, you know, the hate wanker can come in and complain about this because this is a statement of fact. This is not directed at South Africa, and it pains me. But the reality is that time stopped on April 27th of 1994. The West doesn't care about South Africa. It's a rounding error. It doesn't matter in geopolitics, which hurts a lot of South Africans' feelings, but it doesn't. The fact that South Africa won't stand with the United States' asinine position on Russia, Ukraine, doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's just another feather in the cap.
I mean, come on. South Africa still occupies.
You're number 10 in gold production. Yay.
We still occupy a geostrategically important part of the world.
When the Suez Canal gets blocked by a ship, that's true.
But I don't think that America would not want to have some level of influence, leverage over South African foreign policy.
Of course we want influence. That's why we spend all the money there and we put all this effort in, and we want influence and we want to make a difference in South Africa, a positive difference. I mean, we don't give money to save people from dying from HIV with antiretrovirals because it helps our foreign policy. We do it because it's a good moral thing to do. So yeah, we care about South Africa, but in the scheme of things, South Africans seem to think that they have the world by the testicles, like it's 1985 and the world needs its gold and its platinum and its strategic minerals and it's critically important. The reason South Africa was important in 1985 wasn't because of minerals, it's because of apartheid and the opposition to it. And it was on the international stage. And that's why Winnie Mandela was so well known while Nelson rotted in jail.
I know that Teppo wants to come in, but I must tell you this. Somebody I know once took me to Cape Town.
Yeah.
And he said, here, this is where the Russian mafia rules. Yeah, the Israeli mafia. These here are these local guys, the drag dens, this restaurant, that nightclub over there, that hotel there is for money laundering by the criminal network. I mean, is the American intelligence community aware? I mean, if it's true, do they look at South Africa and say this place is infested with criminals who are owning bits of Cape Town or Johannesburg?
Well, let me put this in perspective, and this is not disclosing classified information. When I arrived at the Defense Intelligence Agency, I became the officer covering Southern Africa, and South Africa was my portfolio, among other things. I looked to see when biographies of key military leaders and political leaders had been updated, and there had not been a biographical update for any South African military leaders in 15 years. That was in 2004. 15 years since the biographies updated, since before apartheid ended. That's how important it was to the U.S. intelligence community. Yeah, they are aware of those sorts of things. We have the FBI, of course, the Department of Justice, who follows transnational crime and criminal syndicates in multiple countries. South Africa is one of them. Listen, I mean, you know, if it hurts people's feelings, I'm sorry. South Africa is a place I love greatly, and I think it's an amazing place. But in the scheme of things, geopolitically, South Africa's star has fallen. You're not even Africa's largest economy anymore. Nigeria is twice the size of South Africa's economy, you know, and that's because of ANC failures. Not to get back to the ANC, you know, 28 years of failed macroeconomic policies, undermining education, you know, undermining crime. Listen, let me ask this question, get back to the intelligence real quick. Do you all think that during the National Party era of apartheid, that the intelligence services were effective at what they did? I would argue that the criminal intelligence and the military intelligence and national security intelligence during the National Party were highly effective. The ANC was never a threat to overthrowing the government. It was because the Cold War ended, you know, and the red threat was gone. The Svatgevaar was nonsense and the Hulikevaar was gone. So they couldn't sustain. Anyway, they couldn't sustain with the white population. They're like, this is nonsense. We're hot full, time to go. So it wasn't the ANC or the Pan-African, but they were incredibly effective. How do you take those structures, those existing bureaucracies, and destroy them and get the situation we have today? Would anyone disagree with me that the intelligence services were highly effective during apartheid? I'll entertain that.
I don't disagree with it. Seppo?
Thank you so much. So I doubt that we can compare South Africa today with apartheid. I think that would not be wise at this point. But does South Africa have a catastrophe and a crisis when it comes to intelligence and anticipating major events? Absolutely. Were the Americans reasonable in communicating or publishing information without what is reported? And we are saying so reported even by the president of the country, even though he didn't say so directly, but it doesn't seem that consultation took place. And so was the American announcement bad for diplomatic relations? I think absolutely terrible, and we've amplified that in this conversation. What needs to happen next? One of the viewers and said, we need the right people. We need the right capable people. And excuse the pun, someone said we need ministers to be more intelligent, and ministers of intelligence to be more intelligent. So the space, I think, exists for us to start having more conversations about the right people, the right skills, and for South Africans to take interest in this specific crucial portfolio around state security and intelligence. I doubt, and I disagree once more, that a random guy shooting at people is not an act of terror. I think that is an act of terror. And there are many of those events starting to take place here. The shootings at taverns, at retail areas. We need to be concerned as a country, and we need to fix our own country. That's it for me.
Awesome. How the concluding remarks? I think we're heading out of our time. It's Gauta, and then Chris, your overall, parting shots as it relates to this conversation. Gauta, you're frozen. You're muted. You're still muted, Gauta.
Yes, thank you. I thought Donald would unmute. Yes, thank you. I found the presentation, the comments.
ESCOM. Chris, let's go for you. What are your parting shots?
Speaking of state terror, ESCOM. Good Lord. South Africa once produced nearly half of all electricity in sub-Saharan Africa. 750 million people on the continent at the time, a country with 34 million people. Today, you can't keep the lights on. Anyway, so interesting. If we look at the case of Nigeria, where not only was a terror alert issued, but Americans were evacuated from our embassy in Abuja, very quiet, provincial, state-built capital in the center of the country, which I've been to many times. That's quite a shocking development. Now, some Nigerian officials come out and criticized it, and then, of course, they come back to the point that Seppo is making. That wasn't his point, but he's talking about school shootings. Look, I just want to make it very clear here. A school shooting can be a terrorist act. That doesn't mean it's automatically a terrorist act, and it is. But the problem is the way that is handled, and the systems are set in place for that. We don't have agencies, although it seems to be happening now, that are spying on American citizens. Police can do it with a warrant. You can't get a warrant for 350 million people, and so that's why organized crime is looked at. So that's a challenge here. As far as the case of Nigeria, and South Africa as well, it wasn't just the American embassy that issued this warning. It was also the British, the German, I think the Danish embassy also, I could be mistaken on that one. And in Nigeria, the Brits also issued warnings. So it's not like it's just the US. I mean, you've got a person who's an American on here from the intelligence community that's talking about this, but it's not just the US that issued these warnings. I go back to the statement that one of the viewers said earlier, which I think is the case. I suspect strongly that the US embassy contacted security officials in South Africa and either were unable or unwilling to give them sufficient information to convince them that this was a serious threat, and they ignored it. And they just ignored it for their own purposes. And then when the threat came out, because they have a moral and legal obligation, they were embarrassed, and then they tried to downplay it. There were a lot of events in San Antonio, including Gay Pride Parade. Talk about a prime target for nut jobs to go after. That would have been a big thing to go after. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. So, yeah, look, this is unfortunately with intelligence, it's nebulous. You don't know when someone's right or wrong. Only the people behind the wire know. I can tell you I'm aware of many, many terrorist attacks that have been thwarted, and people will never, ever, ever, ever know about them, both in Africa and the United States. And that's unfortunate that that's the playing field that the intelligence professionals play on. When they get it wrong, or political people say they get it wrong, that's the news. When they get it right, no one hears about it. And that's just the nature of it. You got to live with it. But I don't think the American and the British and other embassies were wrong in issue a warning. Like I said, people keep just making assumptions like this is something. They just did it. No, they don't just do this. We get lots of terrorist threats at embassies all the time. Every day, nutters come up to, oh, my cousin's going to blow up your garage, all sorts of things happen. And people get attacked in their homes. We don't shut down embassies because an embassy employee was shot going to Menlyn. We don't do that. This is a very serious situation that took a high level of information in order to issue this threat warning. And I look, I just leave it at that. I mean, nothing happened. Great. So why are people unhappy? Get over it. Nothing happened. At least you were made aware of it. And I think that's what Shepa was getting at earlier. I don't want to speak for him, but I think he was making that point. At least people are aware of it. So hopefully going forward, the intelligence services and the law enforcement continue to work well with the American Embassy, which I think they will. They have a long history of that. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come on today, Sully.
Thank you very much, Chris. Gauta, you were about to make your concluding remarks, and Eshkom got to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for this lovely debate. Good night.
Okay, guys, gentlemen, it's been an awesome conversation, but as usual, 1 hour is never enough. I think we need to have this conversation again. There are so many angles. I mean, we wanted to just focus on what happened with this particular incident, but I think there's a lot more to talk about, whether South Africa is ready for these things, whether I wanted to ask Chris about the wisdom of President Ramaphosa pulling the intelligence services into the presidency. What if, things have been said about us South Africans trusting in the wisdom of Nelson Mandela, putting so much so many powers into the presidency, and then we ended up with people like that man from Kandla. Look at how he abused those powers, right? So if we say Ramaphosa is correct, given what happened over state capture, to draw those intelligence services into his office for a period, that's what he said. We don't know how long that's going to be. If he gets removed in December and some other hot-headed emotional person with low IQ and unresolved childhood issues comes into that presidency and suddenly has control and direct control over the intelligence services, we're going to be in trouble. So we do have to have institutions that are independent from whoever is in power, that are there for the republic, whatever republic you speak for, so that those people are not there to be at the back and call of politicians. South Africa needs that. Nobody can deny that. I mean, anybody who denies it, let's have another conversation next week about this thing. Ladies, gentlemen, and for those of you who've been following us with your comments, we've tried to read some of them. We see all of them. Do not stop. Please come and join us again next week. We'll announce next week's topic closer to the date, which is every Tuesday of Monday. By Monday, we'll tell you what we're going to talk about next Tuesday. But thank you for the follow. Thanks for the engagement. Chris, thank you for accepting to be part of it. Tsepo, my co-host, and Gauta, of course, my partner, Donald, who's behind the scenes, making sure everything works the way it should. This is WorldView, where we explore everyone's perspective on things that can broaden our perspective. It's been Solly Moeng, Tsepo Maseba hosting you. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.